Anyway, this is a list of things that psychologically healthy people are. So remember that health from the very first semester, very first lecture, first week, health by the World Health Organization is defined as well-being in physical, social, and mental. It's not just the absence of physical complaints. So how do you know if you have well-being in the mental side? And so this is one of your signs. I'm not going to read each one to you. Like I said, you have already been introduced to these concepts throughout to just living life and engaging with society and your friends and family. Okay, so when you if you ever do take an actual psychology course, of which this is not, you actually take a full semester of Psych 101, then you cannot not be introduced to this idea, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it's actually pretty straightforward. Imagine that there's a list, a ranking, and the higher you go, the loftier the ideals are. But this is saying that just like a pyramid, like it's not an upside down pyramid, right? So the base foundation, which is, I guess temporarily I can zoom in here so you can read it, survival needs. And so what it's saying is you won't think about the level above until you've secured the level below, which is understandable on the face of it, right? If you're starving to death, it's hard for you to worry about a house. But then once you have enough food, then you can start worrying about a safe place to live. And you will focus on safety and protection, because if you're in danger, like physical danger, then it's hard. You won't have much time to worry about if you're being accepted among your peers and in society. So you're going to worry about safety and protection before you worry about fitting into your social groups. And then you have to have a social group before you start worrying about if the people in that group respect you, praise you, like that, right? You have to get into the group first. And then until you are safe in your ranking in that social group, then after that you can worry about your own self-satisfaction. Like by this time you're already at the peak, all the way at the peak, and now everything that was worth worrying about below it has been dealt with. You have enough of everything that's below it. So what's there to worry about? What's left to worry about? Well, then your own self-judgment. Not the judgment of other people, but how about how well you judge yourself. Did you achieve your goals? Are you content? Do you have any life regrets? Those kinds of things are called self-actualization, and it's the tippy top. I will not test you on the middle levels. I'll just test you at the top on the exams. I will test if you know that the very, very top is self-actualization, and the very, very bottom is your base needs. Food, water, sleep. You could put air in there. Exercise. How many of us go through life never exercising? So I'm not sure what they meant by putting that word in there. Okay. This Maslow pyramid is in every psychology class and textbook you'll ever run into, but they will introduce it more likely as a historic footnote. They won't say you have to live by this, or you should have your patients live by this. They'll say this is what people used to believe, because there's some serious criticisms about this. This doesn't, and then serious psychologists and psychiatrists will say we don't really believe in this pyramid anymore, if we ever did. First of all, you don't have to look too far to hear about a real life story of somebody who did flip this pyramid upside down. How about the people who sacrificed themselves for the well-being of others? Whatever the reason, the motivation was, it's a family. So yes, parents sacrifice themselves for their children. Relatives sacrifice themselves for each other. But what about brave, honorable, heroic soldiers or first responders like firefighters who put themselves in serious harm, scary harm's way for total strangers. And they're not doing it to make a buck, although it is part of their job description. But that's not their main motivation. They are really trying to save somebody's life of somebody they never met. And so that's a counterexample. Another one is, okay, down here you saw sexual expression. Sexual expression. So what about celibates? Not involuntary celibates, but people who voluntarily, out of their own free will, after careful consideration, decide, that's it, no more relationships for me, no more sex for me. I am going to focus on something else. What something else? Probably something up here, maybe something over here. Some people become celibate for approval from their peers. But anyway, they gave up on this. And so what's up with that, right? So there's clearly a crack in this pyramid. And it's not solved simply by reordering some of these words. There is a problem with the fundamental idea that you're not going to worry about something above until you have secured everything below. But now you know what a Maslow's pyramid is and what's at the top and what's at the bottom. Okay. Dimensions. So in the first lecture, I talked about dimensions of health, where a dimension is like how far you are along each of the dimensions, and it tells you like where you are overall in health. So psychological health have these dimensions too. And well, look at this. There's kind of an overlap because remember, health is physical, mental, and social, but here is social in here. So what's up with that organization idea? Well, clearly, the social side absolutely contributes to mental health. And sure enough, mental health contributes to your social well-being too. It's hard for you to have a good social life, a healthy social interactions, if you are not in a good place mentally. Okay, influences of psychological health. One of the problems with doing scientific studies on mental health issues is that you can't isolate variables, and that's the difference between an experimental study and an observational study. What am I talking about? Experiments and observations, basic sciences lecture. So every week I'm going to warn you, encourage you that the basic sciences lecture is out there and you should watch it, you should read it, find it there on the basic sciences lecture here. Please, if you haven't been through it yet, please read it. There will be basic science concepts questions on the midterm coming up in 2 weeks. So it's almost impossible to do an experimental study because for that you have to isolate variables. But how do you isolate a variable when it comes to mental health? Because it's not just a simple tweak in a brain. You can't stick a screwdriver in somebody's brain, adjust something, and then see what happens. In fact, to this day, we still don't know how the mind works. So we don't know how to modify it. Physically work. And what does that mean? Because can't you Google image for the maps of the brain, and one part of the brain handles this arm, and the other part of the brain handles this arm, and so there, does that mean we know? Okay, we know the large macro views, but if we ask a neurologist, a brain surgeon, show me on the brain where they contain the number 1. Show me on the brain where in the memory cells does it store the concept of love? Or where is this person's first childhood memory? And nobody knows. We don't know how the neurons interconnect to create bits of memory. If you took your computer into, geek club, and say, my computer broke, my homework file is on there, it's due tomorrow, is there anything you can do? Then they can crack their knuckles and say, step aside, and they will go at it. They may have to remove the hard drive, they may have to open up the hard drive, but they can get to those bits because they know exactly where every bit is on a computer. We can't do that to a human, which means experimental studies are almost impossible. The only thing you can do is observational studies. But what's the problem with observational studies? Anybody actually watch the Basic Science Concepts video? What is something that cannot be accomplished with an observational study that is the strength of an experimental study? Because that's something you're going to have to be aware of when somebody forwards you a science, air quotes, science article. You're going to first need to be aware, okay, what this clickbait is referring to is an observational study, and therefore it cannot prove what? Who actually watched the Basic Science video? Okay, so did you remember what I was getting at? The difference between experimental and observational? One of you did. There. So the rest of you said, since I'm not graded on it, I won't do it. No, I'm not accusing all of you of thinking that way. When somebody sends you an article, or when somebody forwards you an article across social media and say, and this article is saying you can become irresistible to your crush if you just eat this food. If you just eat this food. And as you actually, instead of believing it blindly, you actually read the article, and then you see that, and then you notice now, so this is actually an observational study, which means you cannot believe it on face value, because observational studies cannot prove cause. Observational studies cannot prove that one thing caused the other. The only thing it can prove is that those two things happen around the same time. That's it. Those two things happen around the same time. That's it. Does that prove that the one thing caused the other? And the answer is no, it does not. There could be a lot of other reasons why those two things appear around the same time. It could be total coincidence. It could be something else causing the first two, but those two don't actually interrelate. It could be placebo effect. So before you run off and buy a crate load of the thing that the article is talking about, you have to understand it's just an observational study. And that's pretty much all that psychology can do. These psychology articles, this research, they can show a lot of correlation, association, but never walk away thinking, aha, there is one article that says it, so therefore it must be true. It's actually, it never proved cause. Sometimes these associations get pretty strong, and if this is the only thing you got, then this is the best. You're just going to have to make your best guess off of it. So let's take, if you want to achieve this, psychologically healthy people, you want to achieve these things about you, and you realize that in order to do that, you need these things, you need to maximize these things. Then how do you go about it? And in order to get those things from the slide above, you do these things. And again, I'm not going to spend time reading these to you. You've probably heard this a million times already. Okay, this is not in the textbook. It's not in many psych classes, but I threw this in there, and this is from a very famous book. Well, it was very famous a long time ago. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and it's worth a read but only if you have spare time. You don't sacrifice one of your coursework during the semester to read this instead. Just maybe during the summer, get it for yourself. Maybe when you're going off on vacation and you're putting together like a reading list, a list of books to bring with you to vacation, and throw this in there. Anyway, the last one, number 7, the last one, sharpen the saw, means you have these tools of whatever it is you're trying to do. Your tools of memory, your tools of study, or anything you're trying to accomplish. Not even academics. Could be at work, could be relationships, could be your game. You want to get high score on a game. Anything in order to accomplish anything, you have to have a set of skills, you have to have a set of tools to achieve these things you want. And what this is saying is you want to take time to rest your mind, repair your tools, do proper maintenance on your tools. And so for those of you who are working yourself to the bone, this is a reminder that you do need to take some time off. When you rest your mind, you sharpen your mind, you take care of your body, you sharpen your body, so that when you go back into the fight, then your body is stronger, rested, refreshed, and your mind is too. So that's sharpen the saw. Okay, spirituality, a word I used before. I just need to re-emphasize that spirituality is not the same as organized religion. It's not the opposite, but it's not the same. It's kind of independent. Everybody can think of a spiritual person in their social group who is actually not that good of a human being. You would not call that, everybody knows somebody who is high ranking in an organized religion and have many outward shows of it, but you know them as a person individually, and you know they're not that good of a human being. And people know, and everybody knows somebody who is actually pretty spiritual according to these things, but they outwardly say they are an atheist, or they don't believe specifically in any God. They're not a member of any religion. So it means that those two are not that closely tied. Now, of course, then the other two possibilities also exist. That somebody is a high-ranking religious or in a high-ranking member in a religious organization, and they are a wonderful human being. And they are a credit to the religion. They make other people curious about their religion because it has they show all of these things about them, and it makes people wonder, maybe this religion has something to do with it because it's working on him, that's for sure. So and then where somebody is religious and spiritual, and then finally, people who are not religious and not spiritual, they are circling the drain. They are on a downward spiral of life, and they clearly need help. Okay, so that's a difference, spiritual versus religion. I'm not saying you need to find religion, but if you can, and spiritual health is getting higher up there on the Maslow's pyramid, to borrow a term. So these are the benefits of spiritual health. Being tuned in, and mindfulness is the main keyword here. Mindfulness means think about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And back in the nutrition lecture, I said, you are not a dog. You are not a puppet to be played with by food corporations. Instead, think about what the food corporations are trying to make you do, and then decide whether you want to play along, or is there some way you can break those strings. So mindfulness as a strategy then is applicable to every aspect of your life. Whenever you catch yourself doing something that you know you're going to regret someday, if not sooner than later, then ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why do I have to do this? How did I get programmed to behave in this way? Who programmed me, or what programmed me, and what can I do to break that programming so I can take control of my own fate? So mindfulness, to be present in the moment, observe, register, fancy word for digest the facts in your mind, parse it out, figure out what's going on. Okay. This is also something not in the textbook, but I like. Whenever somebody asks you why you did something, I think that there's usually 3 answers to the why. The first answer is you tell others. And the purpose of that is not just to share information, not just to reveal your side of the story, but also to protect your standing in the community, your standing among your social group. So you may have to lie because answering that question with the actual truth may hurt your standing, make you look stupid, make you look bad, be embarrassing. So you don't tell the full truth and only the truth to outsiders. So that's one answer to the why. But then another answer to the why is what you tell yourself. But then the third answer to the why is the real reason, implying that the answer you tell yourself is not the whole truth either. And in psychology, those are called ego defense. And ego defense is things you believe so that you don't think of yourself as a bad person. Lying to yourself is a harsh phrase. Not lying, maybe like reinterpreting or changing the point of view or spinning the truth. But the answer you tell yourself so you don't feel bad about yourself, that's an ego defense, and it's the first thing that comes to your mind when you're thinking about why you just did something. So what you need to do then is use mindfulness to drill yourself down, peel away the layers until you finally get to the real reason. Sometimes it's easy to reach, quick to reach. Sometimes it's very difficult. Sometimes the ego defense is there because it is protecting you from a very deep and painful trauma, physical or mental or social trauma. So maybe it's dangerous to dig that low. Maybe you need professional assistance, like a guide, which means therapist. Somebody who is experienced and trained and educated to help people peel away the defensive layers from something that was very traumatic, and it would just cause more hurt if you were to rip open that shell without proper supervision. So it's not always the first thing you should go for. I mean, not something you should always go for, but be aware that it's there. Okay. Mindfulness is also how do you prepare yourself to get down to the real reason why you did something? Mindfulness, the only way this is going to happen is if you find a calm, peaceful, private place. If you try to do it in the middle of an emergency, in the middle of of a severe emotional experience, then you're not going to get there. Your defenses will be on full power, your shields will be on full power. It's not the way to get there. Mindfulness is a calm, peaceful state so that you can gently ask yourself the real why. When I say calm inner voice, I don't mean hearing voices. Okay, that's a hallucination. Hearing a voice that's not actually there, that's a hallucination. And that's psychiatry, not really for this class. But there are other ways you can talk to yourself. I've heard that there are people who don't have an inner monologue. The only way their thoughts are stated is out loud, and I can't imagine that. But some people claim that they don't have an inner monologue, they just talk, they just come right and talk. It may help them be a YouTuber because it's an internal conversation that the viewer, the audience, can follow along with and enjoy. Whereas people with a very strong inner monologue will be quiet on the outside, and then they'll be boring to watch. But anyway, a calm inner voice means that you can have an internal conversation about the why you did that. For example, self-deprecation is quite a useful social skill. So you did something good, or so in my generation, the old days, I don't know about now, I don't know about your generation, your social circles, but a couple of 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago really, when a lady showed up with a new dress and everybody said, this dress looks not lovely on you, she would say thank you. But if a guy showed up with a new tie and everybody said, hey Bob, nice tie, you know what was the most common response from the guy? If somebody said, hey Moon, nice shirt, my immediate response is, what's wrong with it? And so, well, I guess women too, right? If the woman showed up with a brand new dress and everybody compliment her on how lovely she works, and then sometimes she would say, oh, this old thing, I got it on sale, or she tried to not inflate herself, but say things to diminish the value of that dress. So this is all self-deprecating. And we learned that in our society. I'm sure it's still true, but in different ways in your generation. But what happens is, if you inflate yourself, if you talk highly of yourself to other people, especially to other people, then it'll be a threat. Other people will see it as a threat that you're trying to rise in standing above your station. So they will respond with attacks. Like, look who thinks he's so smart. Oh, who made you, who died and made you God? So you're not as smart as you think you are. And so you would get these attacks if you complimented yourself. But on the flip side, if you say, I'm dumb, I'm so stupid, then at least your casual acquaintances, it's their cue to say, no, you're not. You're not dumb. Oh, come on, don't be so hard on yourself. And then remember that thing you did this morning? That was pretty clever. And so by cutting yourself down, you're inviting the people you trust to shower you with praises. So from childhood we learned, from our first social gatherings, we learn to self-deprecate in order to get compliments. And if we overinflate, then we get attacked. So that's a social skill. It's the society we live in, for better or for worse. What happens now if there's nobody around to play that game? You're sitting by yourself, preparing, doing homework, or whatever it is, so spending time. And then you say out loud, I'm so stupid. Who is there to tell you, no, you're not, you're pretty smart? Nobody is there. And so that I'm so stupid, if you do it often enough, becomes this inner voice that doesn't get a counterbalance. Nobody is there to tell you, no, you're not. And this inner voice turns into this repeating recording, and at some point you may even start to believe it. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So years go by, decades go by, you're used to telling yourself, I'm so stupid, and then eventually you even start to believe it, and then you start to modify your life according to that reality that you think is true, and you go around avoiding opportunities, playing into the persona of somebody who's stupid. So by yourself or with professional supervision, you identify inner voices like that and you confront it and go, where did that come from? The next time you tell yourself, I'm so stupid, try to ask, where did that come from? Why did those words become my habit to say whenever I'm in this kind of a situation? That's called mindfulness. By the way, if somebody does try to cut you down, be aware that other people only have as much control over you as you let them. But that is like pop psychology, right? So all of you have heard that before. Okay, so psychologically healthy people was how I started this lecture. Then what happens for psychologically unhealthy situations, and that's mental illness. Mental illness is getting worse, and it's made worse by social media. The thing about social media is that people who put themselves up there, especially the ones with the most likes and the most subs and the most views, they are projecting or they are presenting the best version of themselves in a tightly controlled view of their life. You only see the corner of their apartment that is neat, and even the ones that show like a messy bed behind them, that's probably like very carefully designed to show just the right amount of messiness for street cred, to make them look genuine. But you don't see the utter disaster of a sewage that they're living in where the camera's not pointing. And you don't see the utter disaster of their life that they're not sharing with you. So their persona is carefully crafted. But then how do you compete with that? When you watch your favorite social media influencers and how they live their lives, and then you look at your own life without that careful design created by a public relations consultant. You look at all of your life and try to compare with that minor view, that small temporary view of their processed production. And then how are you supposed to compete with that? How are you supposed to make yourself feel good in comparison? That's for the viewer. But did you know that people who are social media influencers, they also complain of mental health problems, and for a different reason. Well, back in the old days, it was all about views, so popularity and the feelings of popularity and acceptance by their audience. But now it's become an actual job. So their livelihood depends on it. They have to pay the bills somehow, and that's how they pay the bills. So anyway, that's how they pay for the mortgage on their house. So not only do they have the psychological need to maintain count views and subs, but they also now have this financial need to maintain their social media success. Which means day by day, as they keep posting new stuff, they have to think of new stuff to talk about, new stuff to show. They're starting to run out of ideas. And now they're starting to worry. What happens if I'm no longer popular? What happens if I can't think of anything new to share that is entertaining and relevant and keeping up with the latest memes and other things like that. So they are getting this stress of maintaining this image, and it's causing anxiety and then later depression. Two main mental illness groups that are increasing in all age groups in the US is anxiety disorders and mood disorders. So let's talk about anxiety disorders. That's where the stress is, and you've heard of each one of these, I believe. In any mental health illness, the key letter D, disorder, means it's so bad that it's interfering with daily life. It's so bad that it's interfering with meeting minimum responsibilities, like paying the bills, getting your grades. And I don't mean getting A's. If you are a C student, then the mental health disorder prevents you from getting the C's that you're used to getting. So it just means that your grades are suffering worse than it otherwise would have been. Interfering with your financial responsibilities, with relationship responsibilities. If your family members, your children, your dependents are depending on you to help take care of them or hold up your half of the relationship, but you're not, that's when it becomes a disorder. Social media, well, let's not blame social media for this one. People in general love to take words and terms that they just heard about and think they understand, and then warp the definition or completely ignore the original definition and just use the term however they like to fit their needs, like these terms on the screen. So they would say things like, sorry about it, it's just my PTSD, LOL. Not realizing that there are some clearly defined symptoms to show that somebody has PTSD, like night terrors, avoidance of the original environment, and then avoidance, so remember the D, disorder, so avoidance of the triggers to the point where it's interfering with their responsibilities. And so they are unable to pay the bills, unable to get grades, unable to meet their half of a relationship. Okay, this is a very serious and debilitating mental health disorder. But people use the word the letters PTSD casually, like, oh, sorry, oh my God, did you see what they were serving in the cafeteria? Oh my God, it gave me PTSD. Can you imagine somebody who really does have PTSD hearing that from the other table or from the other side of the hallway? So what with each one of these, what's going on is what you may think is true or what you may understand about each one of these disorders is probably not accurate. Each one of these really disrupts and overturns lives and prevents people from living a quality life. I was going to say something about one. Well, since I mentioned PTSD, probably for the most common serious PTSD situation you may think about is like a war, a veteran from a war, somebody who's lived through like a military deployment or has been a refugee, a victim of a terrible, terrible situation. And yes, some of them do get PTSD, but you don't have to live through that kind of experience to get post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD people get PTSD when the stressor overwhelms their ability to cope. And once again, I don't mean, oh my God, did you see what they served in the cafeteria today? I can't cope. So that's not that kind of definition of coping. It actually it so upsets the disrupts the person's normal psychological state that from then on they have night terrors, serious avoidance disorders, hyper vigilance, and so it's any experience that overwhelms that person's ability to cope with it. So that was anxiety disorders. Mood disorders is kind of the other direction. If anxiety disorders increase heart rate, increase agitation, makes people prone to violence, or risk of violence, then mood disorders are like depression, brings people down, makes them withdraw from physical activity. Let's see. Seasonal affective disorder is not that well known compared to the others. Seasonal affective disorder is when some people notice that they are just more depressed during the winter. And it's something to do with the rays of the sun. So by not getting as many, whatever's in those sun rays, they're not getting it as much in the winter. And it's been shown, once again in observational studies, that they just get into showing signs of major depression in the winter. But then when the sun comes out in the spring, they go back to their usual selves. So a common therapy for seasonal affective disorder is some kind of lamp, some kind of specially built lamp that replaces those missing rays from the sun. So the causes of any of these mental health disorders, let's go back to the slide about, where was it? So slide 5, factors influencing psychological health. If you take one or more of these away, then that is a risk factor for not just mood disorders, but any mental health disorder. It's multifactorial. I think I've already run through this word before. Whenever you watch a video or read an article saying, this is the one thing, this is the hack. So there's a word, hack or something like that. This is the one thing you can do to change your condition. So buy my product and you will feel better instantly or quickly, like that. That is like a red flag that it's a con artist selling something that's not going to work. Because what actually affects disorders in the mind is multifactorial. Every one of these contributes a risk, and then finally for each individual, the effect is that this person now has a mental health disorder. Okay. Watch out for people who try to say those two things happen together, so one must have caused the other. That's called coincidence. I also use the word correlation, and it doesn't necessarily mean there was a cause. For example, so most of you commute to college here. Does anybody here live in a dormitory? That's not what this college is for. So in the classical or stereotypical college or university setting, those students live in a dormitory, and it's many miles, if not hundreds of miles, from where they grew up. So one day in freshman year, somewhere like a few months into freshman year, someone has a mental health collapse, and they go to the emergency room. And everybody's saying, oh, see, college was no good for them. College caused this mental health disorder. Massive depression, psychopathy, schizophrenia, whatever the diagnosis is. College caused it. Did it really? I mean, yes, he moved to college, and then a few months later, he got these symptoms and then got diagnosed by a professional. But did college really cause it? What about the other possibility that this person always had it? It was biological, it was social, it was the family, it was the environment he grew up in, the things he was eating, breathing, drinking, all of these other factors that was surrounding this person from birth all the way up to 18 years of life. And the family members, it started with their parents and then slowly expanded to extended family and nearby neighbors and best friends. They already knew this and they adapted. No matter what the symptoms were, these folks, this close-knit community, accepted the person anyway, adapted, learned to live with it, and helped protect the individual from outsiders, protect them from strangers, protect them from triggers, And that this person then grew up in this growing shell of defenses, social defenses, that kept this person safe. And then one day, literally one day, they left the home, got into a moving van or a station wagon, and showed up at a university 1,000 miles away, removed from any of these protections. And they are put in a dormitory, surrounded by people, total strangers, who knew nothing about this individual's background. They just know their own backgrounds, and they are expecting this person to act normal, like air quotes normal. And without any of these supports, this person fell apart. And then the strangers around him say, see, college caused him to fall apart like this. No, he was always like that. So correlation is not causality. The college is one classic example of that, but any time where somebody is removed from social supports that took years or decades to develop, and then suddenly left, taken out and put somewhere else. So we're talking the military, the faraway dream job that they took, and then they crashed, and several months after moving to this other city for their dream job, instead they crashed and burned, and then had to be sent home, if not to the emergency room. Jails too, prisons. Oh, you think college is bad? You think the military is hard on you? Talk about loss of support structures if you end up in jail. Okay, so that was anxiety and mood disorders are the most common complaints that people suffer from here in this country. But there are other psychological disorders, like personality disorders. This is when the person changes personality. So a famous one is like bipolar disorder. They change from, they think you're awesome and God's gift on earth, and then like a few seconds later, they think you are the devil. They think you are pure evil. Where was that from? Well, it's not something you did. It's that they have a bipolar disorder. Schizophrenia is, I'm not going to go through all of it. Okay, you have to take a Psych 101 course to even scratch the surface. Schizophrenia is when there's a disconnect between your senses and how you process it. It's not unusual for a schizophrenic person to say they see a smell or they feel a color. What happens is the wires, the neural wires from their senses, touch, taste, sight, hearing, by the time it reaches the brain, it's not processed the way the rest of us does it. That's schizophrenia. So that sounds really simple, but now imagine trying to live like that. Trying to live where all of the inputs from the environment cannot be trusted. Then it's not that big of a surprise then that their grip on reality is so fragile. I think you've heard of ADHD already. You've heard of dyslexia. It's a vision issue. It's not a problem with the eyes. It's the way the image is processed in the back of the brain. Autism is when the person's ability to interpret and properly or accurately interpret social cues are not working. Among older adults, depression, the most common problem. As they get older, even much older to the geriatric era, then dementia is an issue. Okay, what's the difference between dementia and just age-related memory loss? The difference is as like this. If you email me and say, hi, Prof, I asked you a question last week, but you never got back to me. So I immediately reply back to you and say, oh, right, you did. I'm really sorry. It's been busy, right? It's busy over here. I'm going to work on your question, and I'll get an answer back to you by tomorrow. Okay, I'm just being old. That's what happens when people get old. They just forget. But if you give them a clue, then they immediately remember and go, oh, yeah, you're right, sorry. or maybe they won't apologize, but they will internally remember, oh yeah, I was supposed to do that. Dementia is you email me, and you did, you literally did, and then you email me again and say whatever happened to that question, and I say I never got an email from you. I don't know what you're talking about. And then you send me a copy of that email that from last week. I'm not, and I mean you're absolutely honest, right? You're not trying to game me or gaslight me, but you really did send it, and here is a copy of what you sent, and I see it, and you go, I'm sorry, but this never happened. I refuse to acknowledge that this even existed. That's dementia, or a sign of dementia. It could be my forgetfulness is just that bad, but it's a sign of dementia. So when those tragic stories of elderly people with dementia forgetting that they had a daughter, it's not a simple matter of just the daughter showing up, showing her face, talking with her voice, and then that will remind her parent that she exists. The parent no longer has those memories. Biologically, however that brain stored that memory of having a daughter, those cells, those connections are erased. Nowhere in that head is a memory of the daughter. It's all been destroyed. It's not like the links are gone and you just have to reestablish the links. The actual cells involved are destroyed. That's dementia. The most famous dementia is what? The most famous version of dementia is Alzheimer's. Yeah. Bereavement is something that the elderly, of course, go through as their friends, their close friends are slowly passing away one by one, and so they are living with increasing isolation. They are running out of energy and interest to make new friends, and so they're running out of ways to express their feelings of loss. I think I will talk about the stages of grief. I'm sure I have it in here somewhere. If I don't, somebody remind me at the end of class. Okay, this is something else that's not in your textbook, but I carried this over from medical school because it's really useful. It's a screening test. It's a screening test. It's not a diagnostic test. What's the difference between a screening test and a diagnostic test? I talk about it in the basic science lecture. SIGI CAPS, which is the first letter of each of these words, is a screening test for depression. A screening test means it's quick and dirty, it's inaccurate, it has high levels of false positives. It doesn't prove that anybody has depression because it's not a diagnostic test. But the reason why you would use a screening test is like a screen, a net, and what happens is anybody who says yes to a few of these or more, then they are a candidate for a diagnostic test. A diagnostic test is expensive, time-consuming, sometimes painful, must be taken or performed by an expert, part of why it's expensive, and at their clinic, so that's part of why it's time-consuming. But you don't want to do that for everybody who might be depressed, because that's a phenomenal waste of time, money, and resources. So you screen individuals, the mass public, for this, or doctors do it. They don't out and out say, like one letter at a time, but through a extended conversation, they are mentally checking off if you say yes, how many times you say yes to these things. And if you say yes often enough, then they say, I would like you to talk to somebody. Do you mind? Can I refer you to a psychologist? And the psychologist will give them a diagnostic test for depression. So screening test, do not take this slide and say, hey, and go to your friend, hey, come here. Do you have problems with sleeping? So don't start going around diagnosing each other. It does not prove anything. It just shows that maybe somebody is likely to benefit from talking to a psychologist. And then again, since there's a high rates of false positives, they could go to the psychologist, and the psychologist said, okay, I understand why your primary care provider sent you to me, but there's nothing wrong with you. Trust me, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just going through a little bit of a crisis. So, okay. If depression becomes too much, then suicide becomes an issue. There's a few slides here about suicide, but I'll let you read that on your own, and you already heard a lot about suicide anyway. There are two takeaways I want you to remember now in this lecture. First of all, don't worry that mentioning suicide might put the idea in their head. Anybody who's ever been sad thought about suicide. Your pet rock died. You're thinking, I'm going to kill myself. Okay, the phrase is out there, the concept is out there, everybody already knows about it. So you mentioning it will not put the idea in their head. But you mentioning it to somebody who is saying scary things might be the window that they've been waiting for to call for help, to ask for help. They've been holding this fear inside, the fear of the depression being because they are afraid of something. And they feeling like the only way out, the only way to solve this is to kill themselves. Then you, who's been noticing these odd behaviors, these uncharacteristic behaviors, will say, are you thinking of suicide? And even if they say, so what? Oh, what are you talking about? Of course not. Even if they say that, still, you've given them a signal, a lifeline that says, I'm here to help you if you want me to help you. They may call on you later. They may take that line right now, or they may call on you later, but this is like your chance to save their life, literally to save their life, just by mentioning, are you thinking of suicide? Because the things you're saying are starting to really worry me. That's the one thing. The other thing is you cannot logically talk somebody out of suicide. The problem with suicide is self-preservation is like our most fundamental instinct. From when life was a single-cell organism with some kind of motility, like some kind of like cilia that made them travel, once they are able to move that life form, then it would move towards food, away from danger. So self-preservation, self-safety is the most basic instinct, and it's a driving force. It's even in the bottom of the Maslow pyramid. People who willingly kill themselves, thinking that this is like the most logical thing to do, or is this like the best option for me? Okay, clearly the logic is not working. The logic has broken in their brain. For you to try to argue with logic, like, why are you so sad? Why do you want to kill yourself? Don't you know that you have this going for you, and this going for you, and this going for you, and you're not have to worry about that, you don't have to worry about that. This is all logic, not going to work. Not going to work. That logic center is broken. That's why they're coming to conclusions like this. It is an emotional response. It is a broken response. Depression too. Depression is also an emotional, something is broken in the mind causing major depression. It is not something you can talk them through. I think a good analogy I like, but let's say somebody was born with a bone disease, a genetic defect, and their bone is very fragile. So they can't lift anything. They have to walk very carefully or they will break their legs. You would not go to this person and say, what's the matter with you? Why don't you pull your own weight? Look at me. Look how much I'm carrying. And you don't see me complaining about it. So stop whining and pick up that bag. Okay, you would never say that to them because you know they have a bone disease. You wouldn't expect them to carry the weight that an ordinary average person would have. So you wouldn't, using that analogy, you wouldn't go to somebody with major depression and say, why are you so sad? Don't you know how many things you have to be thankful for? You better stop crying, or I'm going to give you something to cry about. So you cannot argue with somebody with depression disorder, suicide disorder. The D disorder means that it's actually interfering with their life. Instead, what this person needs is help. Somebody with a genetic bone disease, they need to see an endocrinologist. They need to go to a primary care physician who will refer them to an endocrinologist, an orthopedist, a pediatrician, a genetics counselor. All of these experts who know about that disease, or as much as possible in our current technology, understanding about that disease, and get them as much help as is capable of. So somebody with a major depression, especially at the levels of suicide, they need help with experts. Okay. So if your friend starts saying things that scare you, and you care about them, like you really want them to live, you're not just this casual acquaintance, this office acquaintance, whatever. He lives or dies, doesn't matter to me. No, if you really do care and you really do want to stop them, you don't want them to leave your life, then these are the things you look out for. And then at some appropriate time, tell them you care, you've noticed, you don't want them to die. Are they thinking of suicide? Is there anything you can do? This entire population's awareness of mental health issues have really blossomed these past few years. I remember when I was growing up, when I was a young person, that was something you kept secret, you kept hidden. If anybody found out that you might have a mental health disorder, then you would be ostracized, you would be rejected, you would be fired. People would make fun of you, they would pile on, they would see a moment of weakness, and they would take advantage of it. So everybody was terrified of admitting any kind of this mental health disorder. Nowadays, it's all out in the open, and especially in ambulance work. Among first responders, ambulance work, every ambulance agency has counselors, they have posters, they have regular announcements saying if you are dealing with depression or anxiety, then please come forward, speak to somebody. Every time, ambulance workers, they can see some crap, right? There are the things those eyes have seen, where they've watched not only the spectacular bloody guts stuff, but they've also seen humans being absolute monsters to each other when they think they won't get caught. The most respectable, upstanding individuals in society, when you get behind the locked door and see what they do when they think nobody will catch them, and then EMS just sees it all. And so after especially heinous and horrendous incidents, they even have a formal process it's called the CISM, Critical Incident Stress Management. Among them, after every incident, there's a critical incident stress debriefing with counselors, with supervisors, because EMS has a suicide rate 10 times higher than the general public. So depression rates are 10 times higher than the general public. So that's just the EMS example, but all organizations now, including Queensborough, has a mental health awareness policy. And that's all thanks to these past few decades of increasing awareness. It started with celebrity suicides. The people who are beloved by their fans look like they're living the perfect life, and then one day they suddenly kill themselves, and everybody is shocked. And then thereafter, there's this long parade of people who know them go up to the microphone and say, I wish they had told me something I would have done something. I wish they had let me know, because they were all keeping it secret. Society is now flipped the other way, and it's still not perfect. EMS, Emergency Medical Services, is still a very macho culture. It's not popular. It's not recommended at the street level to show weakness, to show like you can't handle it. Everybody is acting tough, but it's changing, and one by one, at least from at the supervisor level now, it's come from executives to directors to management to supervisor level, where awareness and acceptance of mental health is increasing. It just has to make it down to the rank and file. So everybody thinks they know what stress means, but if we put a microphone to you and say, all right, you define it, and you're going to say, oh, I know what it means, I just don't know how to say it. Stress is the response to a stressor, a threat and irritation. That is stress. Now, that's the physical stress. Mental stress then is response to a stressor, a threat to your mental well-being, and your body tries to respond and try to bring your body back into balance. A stressor is a thing that causes stress. So the test, the exam, the bills, the angry barking dog, the mean-looking person in the alley, those are all stressors. Okay, distress is what you think of when you think of stress, the thing that causes bad things, the things you don't want to happen. But eustress is a positive stress, is a good thing. How can stress be a good thing? Well, when you are psyching yourself up for a game, that's eustress. It's helping you bring your A game. It's helping you run faster. It's helping you react quicker. It's helping you think sharper, so you can overcome, you can defeat the competition. Mind can be tuned in on that exam because you've been studying hard and you are well prepared for the exam. Eustress is when stress helps you accomplish your goals. Distress is when stress prevents you from accomplishing your goals. Okay, so stress, then the stress can be like a matter of point of view. This kid is apparently not enjoying this experience. And who can blame him? He is being held by some really scary looking individual. But to me, that is a source of joy. Not the kid, but if this person were to come up to me and give me a hug, I would be laughing and smiling. Why? Anybody know the reference? Or is it that old? Am I that old? Does anybody know where this cosplay is referring to? Wow, that movie is that old now? Oh, Lord of the Rings. Yeah, Lord of the Rings is an old movie, I guess. So for people who know the movie and love the movie, then seeing this would be like awesome. Like I would be fanboying, I would be enjoying the experience. But this kid is obviously not. So stress could be a matter of opinion. Not always, right? When you have a stress response to pain, nobody likes that, no matter what your opinion is. Okay, eustress helps you bring your A game. How is this possible? How can stress do bad things and at the same time do good things? It's because of what it does to your body. Acute stress happens in the short run. Chronic stress, episodic stress happens short bouts, but repeatedly. So if you have eustress because every time you show up for the game, but you don't have you don't have the stress when you're actually training, then that's episodic. When you are stressed by a classmate, and only when you are in the same room as the classmate, but when you are not in that classroom, you don't see that classmate, so you don't feel the stress, then that's episodic. Chronic stress is when the body's response just continues and nonstop. You never turn it off. Traumatic stress, two definitions actually. Trauma can be a physical damage like a car accident, but also trauma could be like psychological trauma that can cause stress. So The reason why stress could be good or bad is because it does the same thing to the body. It's just that our interpretation is good or bad. So what does it do to the body? Well, in order to understand that, you have to understand that our nervous system, so how our brain communicates with the rest of our body is the nervous system. There's actually two halves. There's the one half is the autonomic, which is like autopilot for you, and then the other half is voluntary. So when you choose to sit up in your chair, when you choose to type on a keyboard, that's voluntary. But what about who's in control of your intestines that moves your food along so for digestion? You are, of course, but which part of you? The autonomic. Who's in charge of making your heart rate go faster or slower? That's autonomic. You don't think about it. It's just on autopilot. And then under autonomic, there's two halves now, sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic is the stress response. It helps you ready to fight or run away. Flight is, when a bird flies. So flight is, in plain English, another way for meaning run away. So if a tiger is trying to eat you, then you probably want to run away. But if you're running after the last fruit on the tree, and then you see somebody else running after that last fruit on the tree, and both of you are starving to death, then you're going to get ready to fight for it. So that's fight or flight. And you can see for both examples why this is a survival trait, to help you survive better than the other guy. Then you will get a chance to procreate with the mate of your choice, and then you will have offspring who are more likely to survive. So sympathetic is a fight or flight. But you don't want to be in fight or flight mode all the time because you will burn out, you will run down. And besides, when you are in fight or flight mode, you have to turn off other parts of your body. When you are turning on the parts of your body that are involved with fighting or running, you have to turn off other parts of your body so that you have this energy, extra energy to divert. The other parts of your body you turn off is digestion and also being calm. But calm helps you do things like invest into the future. So parasympathetic is rest and digest. When you want to calm down, when you want to turn it off, or when you want to settle in, that is your parasympathetic nervous system. And the two, sympathetic, parasympathetic, are in balance. So here you can read this detail is all the ways your body activates for fighting. And I'm running out of time, but read each one of these. And these will make sense, right? When you are scared, when you're watching a horror movie, when you are in an argument, when you're getting emotional, these are all the things your body does to get you ready for action. But then by being ready for the immediate now, your immediate needs, you have to sacrifice something. What you're sacrificing is your future needs. You are focusing on immediate needs by sacrificing your future needs. But that means then that if you keep focusing on immediate needs nonstop, you never turn it off, then you will always sacrifice the future. And eventually the future will become the now. You will run out of road to kick that can down, and then it's going to be time to pay the bills. So that's the problem with chronic stress. Chronic stress, when you never turn it off, when you overstress your body for fight or flight, causes these problems. And now if you think about somebody who's stressed all the time, these start to make sense. Okay, so stress worsens your memory, means it makes you a worse student. The best way to be a better student is to emphasize your parasympathetic, which means relax, get calm, study, be calm to study. Try not to study under stress, which is easier said than done. That other picture above is just reworded here. And then since these letters are hard to see, I retyped it into this screen. So the problem with never turning it off is that eventually, as you sacrifice investment into the future you. You don't invest in new construction. You don't invest in repair. You don't invest in nutrition. Then you start to suffer these consequences. Stress makes it, parasympathetic is how you sleep. So becoming calm, turning it off is how you sleep. If you're under chronic stress, then you'll have trouble with sleeping too. So here are some tips of how to get a good night's sleep. I know for the young people out there, their favorite phrase is, I'll sleep when I'm dead, or sleep is for the weak, or pain is weakness leaving the body, etc., etc. But really, driving while sleep deprived is the same as driving drunk. Going without sleep affects not only your reflexes, but also your judgment so bad, you have poor judgment, that it causes you to get into car accidents, just like driving drunk gets you into car accidents at about the same rates. So get a good night's sleep. Don't drive sleep deprived. Don't do anything important while sleep deprived. The best way to prepare for a major exam is to get a good night's sleep. The second best way to prepare for a major exam is to eat well. Not junk food that'll crash you in the middle of the exam, but healthy food, breakfast and the dinner the night before. And you're saying, but I gotta study. All right. If you're cramming the night before, that adds to stress. It's not the way to prepare for an exam. Every time you take a psychology class, you will learn about the general adaptation syndrome, and it is the formal definition of stress. It is in 3 phases. The alarm phase is when you meet the stressor. You first encounter the stressor, it stimulates a stress response. The resistance stage is when you maintain the stress response. You maintain your attempts to fight or run away. Well, how can I fight? This is an exam. How can I fight or run away from an exam? You're not, but the way your heart acts, the way your muscles act, the way your brain acts, they all resembling a stress response. And then there's the exhaustion phase. So eventually, one of 2 things will happen. The stressor will go away, the tiger will give up on you, or the guy trying to get the last piece of fruit will walk away, or the test will be over, and then the stressor is gone. And then the resistance ends because you're no longer resisting the stressor. Or the tiger does catch up with you, the opponent does beat you up, and now you don't get the fruit, or the exam is still ongoing, or the boss at work will not give up, will not let up on you. The boss is being a jerk and will not stop. Eventually, your stress response ends anyway because you are exhausted. All that fuel you are using to maintain a stress response is exhausted. You run out of fuel and your body completely collapses. Your mental ability to maintain stress completely collapses. And sometimes you see it as a nervous breakdown. So that's the way. It starts, it maintains, and it ends. Either ends the good way or the bad way. That's the exhaustion phase. Homeostasis, the fancy word for your body is staying in balance. And stressor is the thing trying to knock you off balance, and the stress response is what your body does to bring you back into balance. Okay, causes of stress. Oh, I don't need to tell you that, right? Everybody here can think of at least 3 things causing you stress in your life. This poor guy is getting walloped by 7 things, and so are most of us. You can also have internal stress. So what if that tippy top of the Maslow's pyramid, the self-actualization, seems very, very far away, like you'll never get there. In fact, the things that you are forced to do out of desperation in the world you are in is taking you in an opposite direction, making you do things you hate about yourself, making you suffer the consequences of some bad decisions, and so you just don't like yourself. And that's adding to your stress. So that is affecting your spirituality. Everybody knows the type A and the type B personality. Did you know there's a type C and a type D personality? It's just not as famous. This will be on the test. This will be on the test, knowing the difference between A, B, C, and D. So please read that. Psychological resilience is your ability to maintain the stress response, so you don't get into the exhaustion phase. How do you gain psychological resilience? Well, strengthen yourself, right? How do you maintain physical strength? Go to the gym. How do you maintain psychological strength? So work on those support systems that was all the way up in the beginning of this lecture. If you are weak in some of those support systems, then see about fixing it. Repair your relationships. Eat right. Get good rest. Take care of yourself so that you build up the support structure so that when you do get walloped by a massive stressor one of these days, your mind is ready to handle it. Mindfulness will help change your point of view so the stressor is not as threatening as you initially thought it was. Exercise, get enough sleep, self-nurturing, take care of yourself, sharpen the saw, good diet, healthy diet, not coffee and potato chips the night before the exam. I've done that, coffee and potato chips, and invest in loved ones. What if your loved ones don't invest in you? Well, you start the cycle, you start the process. More skill, more techniques. Everybody procrastinates. I procrastinate. Procrastination causes stress. It'll never end. Procrastination never ends. Never promise yourself, I'll never procrastinate again. That doesn't happen. Okay, you are a human being, therefore you procrastinate. But what you can do is find ways to not let it damage your life as bad as it could be. And that is, again, with mindfulness, taking care of yourself. Time management. So how can you get a good night's sleep if you hadn't studied until the night before the final exam? Obviously, you have to manage your time. Some of you are falling behind in the homeworks and quizzes. You got to manage your time. I'm not saying your life, you have nothing else better to do. Of course you do. You have a real life back there demanding your time. But you made a commitment to be a student here, and you put some real money down to succeed in this class. So you got to make time to study to keep up with your responsibilities. Some relaxation techniques here. Pick one that works for you. So read more of these if you're interested. I got to be honest, I'm not that into yoga. Maybe someday I will, but I'm not really much. But that doesn't mean it's not true. It's just, it doesn't seem to be for me individually. Okay, seeking professional help. So if you do feel at the end of this long lecture that I'm now 2 minutes over, that you would like some help, then Queensborough Community College is here to help. They're outside of Queensborough Community College. There's the New York City services available, and the Medical Arts Building is over there. So, and they have absolute confidentiality. It's the law. They will not share your situation with anybody else. So you have that safe to protect, to rely on. So anyway, thank you for your patience. You have only 8 minutes left to go to your next class, so sorry about that. But I will end it here, and you can now attempt a homework and quiz.